let's go on to question 9. Thanks for at least talking about it, but we're not going to solve it today. Jesus sends us out to make disciples. Matthew 28, you know these verses, but I think it is important to be reminded of them. Matthew 28, 16 through 20. Does somebody want to read those verses?
Now the 11 disciples went to Galilee, to the mountains to which Jesus had directed them. When they saw him, they worshipped him, but some doubted. And Jesus came and said to them, "All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything that I have commanded you. And remember, I am with you always to the end of the age."
Okay, we are sent out to make disciples. We don't just gather here at church for our own sake. It's not just a spiritual self-improvement project. Nothing wrong with being spiritually self-improved, but that's not the end of it, is it? We're called to go out. We're called to be a light to the nations. We're called to fish for people. We're called to make disciples. What does that mean in today's world? What do you think?
Let your light shine where you are.
Let your light shine where you are, okay? What does it mean?
Well, it says here we should, it involves teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you.
Yeah.
So it's teaching. Teaching Christ's way.
Okay. Ultimately, I don't know if we start there. Let me tell you about the Sermon on the Mount. Might not be where we start, but
Most of us, I think, start by trying to serve as an example.
sure. We're better and more comfortable with that, serving as an example rather than using words, aren't we? We can go back to what Julie talked about earlier, being a witness. I think part of being a witness is just giving testimony to the things we've experienced in our life. What have we seen and heard ourselves? How has God been good to me? How has God helped me along the way? And I don't necessarily have to hit you over the head with it, but I can share that. I can share that example of what that means.
And you need to, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
You need to meet people where they are at.
Absolutely. Meet people where they are. We need to ask questions. I think whatever we do comes best out of a relationship with them. Tell me about your life. Tell me about your challenges. Yeah. It's a different question. It feels like a different question, I'm guessing, because we live in such a pluralistic culture and we're more mindful of other people and their religions. Should we try to convert somebody that is a Jew? Should we try to convert someone who's a Muslim or a Hindu? And that's a harder question, isn't it? We struggle with that in our culture. But I think it's one that we have to come to terms with. I like the image of sharing God's welcome. You know, I think that welcome can open us up to other people. It's creating a place for all to belong. I've shared the story before. When we had a tutoring program in my last church, there was a Muslim family that came, and I invited them to church. And they came, and they sat in the front on Easter Sunday. And I think they felt welcome. They came several times, and we had a relationship with them where we got to know them. And I don't know if they ever became Christians or not. That didn't happen when I was there. But we shared a welcome with them and an invitation to come and be a part of our life and our love. And it felt good. It felt good to be sharing aspects of life together. And so I think that's part of how we're part of God's plan too. We're sharing that welcome. And maybe in the process we make some disciples. And it doesn't just happen through children, that get baptized. It doesn't just happen through people that come from the old country over here to immigrations. Maybe our testimony, maybe our welcome is what brings them in the door and invites them in.
Brief comment.
Yes?
I think it was St. Francis who said, preach the gospel constantly and if necessary use words.
Yeah. Patron saint of Lutheran chickens, right? Easier to live with our life than with our words. But yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. Our words and our deeds have to match up, always. Absolutely. Let's go on to the last one, okay? Okay, so we're part of this mission. We're in partnership together. We're part of God's mission of love. We're part of God's mission of justice. We're going out and making disciples, and we look forward and hope to the day when God will make a new heaven and a new earth. Revelation 21, last book of the Bible. Let's read 21 verses 1 through 6. I love these verses of Scripture. Somebody want to read those?
Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and the sea was no more. And I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, See, the home of God is among mortals. He will dwell with them. They will be his people, and God himself will be with them. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes. Death will be no more. Mourning and crying and pain will be no more, for the first things have passed away. And the one who was seated on the throne said, See, I am making all things new. Also he said, Write this, for these words are trustworthy and true. Then he said to me, It is done. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. To the thirsty I will give water as a gift from the spring of the water of life.
Thank you. So what's your vision of heaven, of the life of the world to come?
Sounds like perfect.
It's going to be perfect?
Sounds like it.
Yeah. It does, doesn't it? It sounds like it's going to be perfect. What else?
No sin.
No sin, which you could argue from early on in this course, sin was something that separates us from God. So suddenly we're gathered around the throne and God is there and there's no separation anymore. There's nothing to separate us from God. What's your vision of heaven?
Stress.
No stress. I like that. I like that. No stress. No sleepless nights. No tossing and turning. There isn't any nights at all, is there? Everything's day. The lights, it's like being on the above the Arctic Circle. There's light all the time.
For me personally, I don't think I have any idea what heaven's going to be like. I don't think we can identify, and whenever words are put here are put in human terms. I mean, I just can't imagine the glory.
Can't imagine the glory. Hard to imagine. Everything here is just an extension. They don't mention golf, but they could have. All right, it's just an extension of what's great for us on earth, and then some. Right?
Rick has a plaque, if there isn't golf in heaven, I'm not going.
I didn't buy it.
But do you believe it? No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, you know, the Bible gives us a lot of pictures for what heaven looks like, and all of them are just little snapshots. We could read on in Revelation. I love chapter 22 where it talks about the trees that are there. The tree of life is back again, and all these leaves are there and there for the healing of the nations. It's like all that's broken, all that's wrong gets made right. And I love what we just read in verse 5. I don't think we should ever sell it short. And the one who was seated on the throne, and that's God, by the way, the one who was seated on the throne, and God doesn't speak, he only speaks twice in Revelation, said, See, I am making all things new. Notice what that doesn't say. It doesn't say, I am making all new things. You know, that's what happens with the flood, isn't it? God comes, everything gets wiped out, and God basically starts over again. This is, I am making all things new. That's renewal, that's regeneration. That is God doing what God does best, making a new creation out of everything that got tainted along the way by sin and brokenness.
Just think of our bodies, you know.
Think of our bodies. Not a brand new body, but a renewed body. God.
Lord,
Yeah, and it's look at it, verse 1. We forget that. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth. And Jerusalem's coming down out of heaven, and it's being made new on earth. Like we can't blow up the place. God needs to renew it someday. And so I love that fact that it calls that renewal down to us and gives us a hope that I think is very encouraging in the here and now. We won't take the time to talk about that, but you might reflect on it. What hope does that give you now? How does that help you live differently? Because you know that your future is secured, even if Rich and the rest of us don't exactly know what that's going to look like. It's going to be amazing. We don't have a lot of time left, but let's just get started. And if you need to leave, fine. But I'm going to kind of race through who decided which books belong in the Bible, okay? Because I think this is interesting, and if you don't, well, you should. I'm just kidding. But it's kind of helpful to know what's in there and what isn't. The books in the Bible form an authoritative collection or canon. You knew that, didn't you? You know the word canon. Canon is not spelled with two N's. That's the thing that points and shoots, right? This is a different kind of canon, which means a rule or a standard. Nobody started out to write a Bible. They started out to write books of faith for people, letters for congregations to be built up. And so we've collected those writings, said no along the way, but mostly the ones we have, of course, they said yes to. And we determined in the process that some writings bear faithful witness to God and others do not. Remember the thing a few years back when they had the Gospel of Judas that was found? Everybody wonders about that, the Gospel of Judas. Why isn't that in there? Well, because somewhere along the way people deemed that that was not a faithful witness to God. And what you found out early in the New Testament, I'll just give you an example of this, is that the Gnostic writings, you've heard of the Gnostics, right? Have you heard of the Gnostics? Is that a strange word, or do most of you know what that word means?
Yes.
It's a strange word. It has to do with the Greek word for gnosis, which is the Greek word for knowledge. Okay? And Gnostics were one of the first heresies in the New Testament. They developed 2nd and 3rd century especially. And with the Gnostics, they thought the material world was evil. And so everything was just spiritual. Spiritual world was good. The material world was evil. So you get to something like the creation story. God saw all that God had made, and behold, it was very good. Well, the Gnostics could never say that because that was part of the material world. In fact, they couldn't even say that about Jesus. They would say that Jesus was just somebody who appeared to be in human flesh. Because if he really became fleshly, well, that's evil. That's bad. Everything, all the bad impulses we have in our lives come from our human bodies. So you can begin to see where you end up with what some people would call heresy in New Testament times, because they had different ways of looking at the world that God gave us and what God did to that world. God redeemed it in Jesus, who we would say came in human flesh. Okay, does that make sense? Kind of? Well, we'll press on. Hopefully most of this stuff will make sense.